Hey everybody, it's Helen Hillix from My Heart to Yours and YouTube. And I was asked to do a podcast and a YouTube video about how to check in with higher consciousness, how to make an intuitive decision, whichever one you want to do that, how to lead a guided life. But it's really the idea of being able to check in with something, some wisdom higher than our own, to ask about things that we're not certain of. And you don't even have to wait till you're not certain of it. If you're going to lead a guided life, you get to ask about every single thing that you do, what you eat, what you wear, where you go. And it's not something that you're going to learn overnight. But I wanted to hop on today and talk about that because I think it's something that we all can really benefit from learning. And I promise you, if you listen to this, you're going to have the basics of how to check in. And you never have to make a decision. My friend Beth Green said that, she heard God, quote unquote, say this to her years ago was, once you learn how to listen to higher consciousness, to higher wisdom, then you never, well, this was actually in reference to the second step of Alcoholics Anonymous. But it is, turn your life and your will over to the care of God as you understand God. And what she heard was, you'll never have to make another decision by yourself again. And that just makes me cry every time I hear it, honestly, because that is so touching, the idea that we never have to make another decision alone again. How many of us have suffered and struggled and wondered if we're making the right decision? And if you learn how to check in, then you never have to worry about that again, because you're not making the decisions alone, and you don't have to worry that you're making the wrong choice because you are listening to guidance. Now, I want to say a few things about it to begin with. Number one is the ego has a way of masquerading as higher consciousness. So often, I remember my stepson, we were going to a movie or something, and he wanted some ice cream, and I said, well, let's check in about that. And he said instantly, I get yes. Well, he wasn't really checking in. He wanted the ice cream, and he may have thought he was checking in, but his ego was really telling him what to do. And that can happen very often. I know I have had it happen to me many, many times when I want a certain outcome. So that's the second thing. The first thing is that the ego masquerades as higher consciousness, and you have to be really aware of that. The second thing goes right along with it, which is you've got to be neutral. You get to be neutral before you start this process, because if you have an agenda, that's absolutely the introduction to the ego to jump in and have its way, because that's the fertile soil for it, is the agenda that you have about that question. So make sure that you're as neutral as you possibly can be. And somebody taught me a step, and that is, you can't see it on the podcast, but your sternum, you take your 4 fingers and you just tap on your sternum, just tap, tap, tap. You may be able to hear it even on the mic. You tap, tap, tap on the sternum. And I don't know why that works. I have no idea why that helps, but it does. And, it makes you feel a lot more neutral. So try that as a way of getting neutral before you start. Now, this is the way I was taught to learn how to check in. And I want to say that this is just one method. You may have a million methods. There's muscle testing where you put your arm out and then, you ask questions, and, that kinesiology way of testing, the muscle testing, where you ask a yes or no question, or you ask, does this medicine going to work, and your body will tell you. I don't know that method. The method that I know is literally asking, is X or Y for the highest good of all? Would it be for the highest good of all for us to buy this new car? And then you have to listen for the answer. Now, that brings up the next point. Once you're neutral, then you have to learn how to hear the yes or the no. Now, some people, this is very natural. Some people feel it in their bodies. They just get a feeling in their bodies and they know what is the right thing to do. And I have to say that I guess most of us really have pretty good intuition. Most of us know what's right and what's wrong. Most of us have a sense of what we should be eating or what we should be buying or what we shouldn't be buying. So this is not really magic in that regard. We all have that, and we're all aware that we have that. So the techniques that I'm going to talk about may not apply to you. You may have a different one. You may have a better one. I'm just offering something for those people who don't know how to check in and who want to try. So there are 3 ways that you can, or maybe more, I don't know, I never heard of anybody who smelled yes or no, but for me, I feel it in my body. I feel the yes or the no. And it's so much easier if you ask just yes and no questions. So I'm going to get to that next step in a moment about how to ask, what you say to ask and how to make it into a yes and no question. But I want to talk about the 3 ways that people, that I know of anyway, that people hear or experience the yes or the no from higher consciousness. One way is to feel it in your body. And that's a very common way. There are people, I have a client who sees it as a pendulum, which I thought was just so fascinating. You know, she asks the question and then she sees a yes and a no, and she will see the pendulum go one way or the other. And that's how she knows. I have other people that I've heard of who hear it, who auditorily hear a yes or a no. Now, you know, is it really an auditory experience? I don't know, but that's how they interpret it, is it that it's auditory, that they hear a yes or no. But I think most people that I know of feel it in their body. They feel that energy experience in their body. So that's how I'm going to teach you. And this, I love this way. I think one of my friends developed this for her kids, but I just love it. And I've used it with all my clients, teaching them how to do it, because I thought it's very simple and it's really straightforward. And that is that you ask, you say to yourself, my name is Fred. Now, if your name is Fred, then you have to come up with some other name. But the way you distinguish between yes and no is that you say, my name is Fred, when your name is not Fred. My name is Helen. So when I say my name is Fred, I get a very weird feeling in my stomach, just a kind of a tight feeling that is my whole body saying, no, it isn't. That isn't my name. And when I say my name is Helen, I get just this whoosh feeling that just goes right through me, a feeling of relaxation, of the flow of energy. Now, some people feel it as a tingling energy. And when they feel the no, I'm not Fred, they feel a tightening in their chest. So there are many, many ways that you might experience it in your body. And that is completely up to you. There's no right or wrong way at all. It's just noticing the difference between the yes and the no. That is the only thing that's important. And when you say, my name is Fred, you might see a pendulum that swings over to no, or you might hear no. But I can't remember all the different senses, but I know that I never met anybody who smelled or tasted yes or no. I'm not saying that couldn't happen. You know, that may be you. You may taste yes. You may get a metallic taste in your mouth when it's no, and you may taste an apple when it's yes. I have no idea. But the ways that I know of are the visceral experience, the physical experience in your body, or the hearing, or the seeing. So those are the 3 ways of doing it. So now let's go back to the step of, you know, how do you ask? So this is the most universal way that I have heard of, is to say, is it for the highest good of all, including me? Now that is because I believe in the oneness, and I believe that if we don't include ourselves, it sets up this paradigm where it's either good for everybody and it's not even considering me, or it's good for me and I don't care about anybody else. So I learned this from the Living with Reality book by Beth Green, and she talks about this in one of the chapters, which I don't remember right now. But anyway, it's about the fact that we can be individuals within the context of oneness, and that we need to include ourselves in the oneness, because we're not going to be happy if it isn't for the highest good of all. And we're not going to be happy if it isn't for our highest good. So we get to say it that way, that is this for the highest good of all, including me? Now, and then you ask whatever it is, whatever you want to know about, that puts it in a yes or no context. You don't ask, what kind of a job should I go for? Because that is just, you could hear 1,000 different answers, and it's way too complicated. It's really important to make it into a yes or no question and keep it very simple. So is it for the highest good of all, including me, for me to apply to this job? Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to get it, but is it for the highest good of all, including me, for me to apply for that job? Is it for the highest good of all, including me, for me to wear this teal colored shirt today? And I'm not kidding when I say that, because our energy is important. And if today is a teal day, then it's for my highest good and the highest good of all for me to wear a teal shirt. Now, that may seem really trivial, but this is the important part of this, guys. Really listen to this. Because a friend of mine, it's really my daughter's, one of her very best friends since childhood, has passed this very high level testing for this really important job. And she's going to be offered the job. And she said, I need to ask intuitively whether I'm supposed to take it, because this would be a big life-changing experience. And this is the situation, is you don't wait until you have, a life-changing job opportunity to learn how to check in. You need to be practicing all along by what shirt you should wear, what you should eat for breakfast, which way you should drive home. Should I drive home on the coast or the inland? Whatever it is. Practice on all these things that you don't think make a big difference. Which movie should we see tonight? Should we see, the piano, or should we see The Music Man? You've got to practice on these things that aren't really life-shattering. And for several reasons. One is because you probably don't have as much energy invested in the outcome of what shirt should I wear. Should I wear this teal shirt, or should I wear this salmon shirt? I probably don't have a huge amount of energy invested in that. But that's how you practice, is that you do it with things that you don't have a huge amount of energy invested in. That way you can practice over and over and over again, and you get really good at knowing what yes feels like and what no feels like. And that's so important, because then when you do come up to an important question, you have so much experience at how that feels in your body to hear the yes and to hear the no. Now, there's another aspect of this too, is when it comes to something tricky, and something, let's say, like, is it for the highest good of all, including me, for me to break up with my boyfriend tonight? That's another thing. I'll just take a little segue, a little side trip here. Make the question as specific as you can. Because if you say, is it for the highest good of all for me to break up with my boyfriend? You might hear yes, but it's not time specific at all. It could be in 10 years. So make it as specific as you can. Am I supposed to break up with my boyfriend tonight? No. Am I supposed to break up with is it for the highest good of all, including me, for me to break up with my boyfriend tomorrow? You might hear yes. But so make it as specific as you can. And when you have a really important decision to make, don't try to check in by yourself. Now, why do I say that? Because those really big, important decisions are ones that we might really be tweaked out by our egos, like this young woman's job opportunity. It's a prestigious kind of a job, and making a lot more money than she's ever made. So don't you think her ego is going to be a little invested in that? I do. I think her ego is going to be a lot invested in that. Besides the fact, though, that then her ego might be scared of the challenges. So it might go the other way. The ego might say, no, we're safe here. We're safe here. We don't want to do that. So it's so seductive to ask by yourself and then have the ego interfere and tell you the wrong answer. So it's so important when you're doing a check-in about something that really, really matters to you. Make sure that you check in with somebody whose consciousness you really trust. And you might check in with several people whose consciousness you really trust. So this brings up another question. People say, well, aren't there many truths? I don't believe so. I don't believe there are. I believe that there is one right answer to that question of, is it for the highest good of all for me to take this job? I believe there's only one right answer to that. And it's not my answer. It has nothing to do with me. But I believe that there is a consciousness, a wisdom higher than my own, into which I can tap. And of course, that's the whole idea of checking in, isn't it? That, you have to believe that there is some wisdom higher than your own, or otherwise forget about it. Some people think I'm tapping into my own higher wisdom. That's okay. You think whatever you want, as long as you can get neutral and out of your brain telling you what to do, or out of even your heart telling you what to do. And that's important, because some people think, okay, I don't want to make a decision in my brain. I want to make it from my heart. Well, forget that. I mean, and this, I don't know, I could talk all night about this apparently. Because do we want to eliminate thinking? No, hell no, of course not. We want to think things through. Absolutely think things through first. For instance, if you think you should buy a new car, look at your budget. Absolutely look at your budget. You don't have to be stupid and throw out your mind. Absolutely look at your budget and see, what you can afford, if anything. Maybe as soon as you look at your budget, you'll decide it's not going to happen at all. Just the other day, my sister and my husband and I have been talking for years about moving in together as we get older. Well, now we're getting older. We're all of us are right around 70-ish. And so we thought we'd sit down and look at, go online and look at houses the other day. We didn't start with checking in about that because we didn't have any information yet. If we had found the information and it had all pointed toward that direction, then we would have gotten together and checked in. But first we were going to do a little research. Well, within about a half an hour, we saw that it made no sense at all, that any house that would be good for the three of us to live in would cost exactly the same as us living separately. So we just laughed our heads off and said, this isn't meant to be. And if and when we need to be living together to help take care of each other, we'll live together in one of our homes already. So in that case, we didn't even need to use our intuition. We just faced the facts, and the facts guided us in one direction. So when you're going to make an intuitive decision, absolutely get the facts first. She wouldn't accept this job without finding out how much they're going to pay her and where she's going to be living and what kind of training it's going to be, and how long she'd be away from her husband for the training or whatever, all the different pieces of information. Of course, you want to find out those pieces of information first, and you want to discuss them. You want to discuss them with your partner. You want to discuss them with your family. You want to take time to process. It's only after you have gone through the intellectual and emotional and social processes and discussed everything thoroughly, that's when you check in. Now, of course, I'm not talking about whether I should wear this teal shirt. I don't need to discuss that and do research on that. That is a purely intuitive, quick, easy decision that I make in the closet every morning. But I'm talking about the larger decisions that, of course, you want to do some research and feel like you have exhausted all of the normal avenues and gathered all the information you can, and then you ask and use your intuition. So let's go back over the steps that we've talked about. First you have to obviously identify what you want to ask, what the question is that you want to ask. Then you have to, and it always comes in the form of, is it for the highest good of all, including me, that I do X, or I buy Y, or I wear Z? And it always has to be in a yes or no format. Then you get neutral. You get neutral, and you can do the tapping on the sternum, or, people have all different kinds of methods of getting neutral and centered. You might meditate first. And then, after you're neutral and you've got your question, it's really important to get centered and to connect to higher consciousness, to feel yourself opening and opening your ego. This is all part of that getting neutral step, is to really get neutral, is to let go of everything and surrender your ego agenda and connect to higher consciousness. And then you go through that, you ask the question, and you wait until you have that either the yes or the no experience, whether it's in your body or you hear it or you see it. Now, as I was saying a minute ago, this whole intuitive process is all after you've done research. Now, people ask me all the time, well, what if you get the wrong answer? Well, if you practice and practice and practice and practice, you're going to get the wrong answer sometimes. And one of the benefits of that is, like any other mistake you make in life, one of the benefits is going to be that you see what happens when you don't hear correctly. If you, for instance, I don't know, you get yes to going to see this movie that you absolutely despise. Well, I don't know, that doesn't even tell you whether you made a mistake or not, because maybe you were meant to have that experience anyway. And I can't think of a good example right now of knowing that you made a mistake, because so often your intuition will guide you to a place that you don't actually like, but it's something that you need to learn from that experience. So that's a good point that I'm glad that came up, because you're not always going to like what happens when you ask for spiritual guidance. You're not always going to like the outcome. I mean, just take that in, let that soak in for a second. You're not always going to like the outcome. You may get that you're supposed to apply for a job, and you accept the job, and then you hate that damn job. But if you open your mind and you take a look at, I wonder why the divine energies, the higher consciousness energies guided me to take that job. And if you think about it, you can figure out why. And maybe not right away, but at some point you'll be able to figure out why you were supposed to take that job, even though you didn't like it and it didn't turn out the way you want. So going back to the issue of practicing, practice. I'm not saying practice makes perfect, because I don't believe there is any such thing as perfect. But practice makes you a lot more confident in what you're doing. And, you're going to make mistakes. You might, again, I cannot think of an example of how you're going to make a mistake, because there's always something to learn. And this is, of course, the topic for a whole other podcast, is that every moment can be a transformational opportunity. And I will do a podcast about that, because I really totally believe in that. I don't care what's happening. It's an opportunity for us to learn and grow. So all I'm going to say is practice. And when things don't turn out the way you want them to, use that as an opportunity to learn something, whether that was a mistake. Now, okay, I'm going to give you an example of a mistake, which is, there are times okay, it's kind of in the opposite direction, but there are so many times when I have asked, is it for the highest good of all, including myself, to do X? And I sort of had a suspicion that it was the ego. And then as it turns out, whatever the outcome was, I could totally tell it was my ego, because it was pure agenda. I had an agenda. I had not gotten neutral, and I could tell that from the consequence that happened. And then there are other times when I absolutely hear intuitively, take your umbrella or take your wallet or whatever it is. I mean, a real direct message that I can't really ignore, but then I ignore it and I argue with it and tell it, I don't need my wallet. I'm not going to buy anything or whatever. And then whenever I get where I was going, I did need my wallet. That's happened to me a million times, and I'm sure it has to you. So that's an example of not listening to our intuitive guidance just from the get-go. I mean, I didn't even ask in that case. I was actually told to take it, and I still didn't do it. That's what a stubborn little shit I am sometimes. But those are really great learning opportunities too. And, let's not shame ourselves. That's just human. But you can learn from making mistakes just as well as you can learn from practicing. So don't beat yourself up if you do end up really feeling like you were listening to your ego after all, and that really wasn't higher consciousness talking to you. So my voice is kind of giving out here, which must mean that that's higher consciousness telling me to shut the hell up. I've talked enough. So I hope this was helpful, guys. I really know from my own personal experience that the more you check in with higher consciousness about every decision you make, the more relaxed you are, the more relaxed you'll be, because you can trust that. And I know for myself, I'm anxious when I make choices because I don't know for sure if it's the right choice unless I check in. And we all are anxious. We live in a stress-filled world. Let's not make ourselves have more stress by feeling like we have to make every decision by ourselves. Let's use this tool of checking in with higher consciousness, and you'll find it to bring you a great deal of relaxation in your life. Even if you don't always like the consequences, you'll feel so much more relaxed because you'll know that you are doing what you're guided to do. So that's it for today, folks. I love you. I hope you'll use this tool, and I hope you will contact me at Helen at HelenHillix, HILLIX.com with any comments you have. I hope you will subscribe to this podcast and share it and rate and review it. And I have a whole goodbye section that'll tell you about my free gift, but I really want to put a plug in for my free gift. Check it out. I love you guys, and I'll see you next week.